Delighted to welcome all of you this evening to the first talk in the Center's 2017-2018 Music and Culture Lecture Series. Before I introduce this evening's speaker, I'd like to make a few announcements. As usual, we are live streaming this lecture from our YouTube channel, and after the talk, we've reserved time for a question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone here in the gallery, and if you're watching via the internet, you can participate by posting questions for our speaker in our YouTube chat room. We encourage lively and civil discourse and look forward to everyone's participation. After the talk, there will be reception here in the MMaP gallery, to which all of you are invited. I'm extremely excited about the lectures scheduled for the series this year and would like to ask everyone to mark them on their calendars to enjoy these exciting events. Our next talk will take place on Tuesday, October 3rd, when Dr. Jocelyn Guilbeault from the University of California at Berkeley will deliver an address entitled The Political Economy of Music and Sound. On Tuesday, November 7th, Dale Jarvis from the Heritage Festival of Newfoundland and Labrador will deliver the third lecture in this year's series entitled Safeguarding Living Heritage in Newfoundland and Labrador. On Wednesday, January 17th of next year, Memorial's own Dr. Ellen Waterman will give a talk entitled The Idea of the North, Post-Nationalism, and the Changing Ecology of Experimental Music and Performance in Canada. The series continues on Thursday, February 15th, when Dr. Jeremy Wallach from Bowling Green State University will give a talk entitled Metal is Always Protest Music, an Ethnomusicological Perspective on the Indonesian Heavy Metal Scene. And our final music and culture lecture for the year will take place on Tuesday, March 6th, 2018, when Dr. Jason Beester-Jones will give a talk entitled Stylistic Mediation and Creative Practice. Each lecture will begin at 7:30 Newfoundland time. Beyond the Music and Culture Lecture Series, the Center hosts a wide range of events. To find out more about what's going on here at MMaP, you can visit our homepage at www.mun.ca/mmap. You can follow us on Twitter at MMaP@Memorial. That's MMAPAT Memorial. You can follow us on Facebook. Just search Facebook for MMaP Research Center, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, just search YouTube for MMaP Research Center. If you miss any part of tonight's talk, you'll be able to view it again from our YouTube channel, where it will be posted in the next few weeks, and where you can also see videos of past Music and Culture Lecture Series talks and other center events. I am delighted to introduce this evening's speaker, Dr. Teresa Marie Connors. Dr. Connors has recently arrived here at Memorial, where she is a postdoctoral research fellow at the International Institute for Critical Studies in Improvisation. Connors, who recently completed her PhD at University of Waikato in New Zealand, is a scholar and artist whose compositions and multimedia installations use sound to explore the complex links among technology, performance, and the environment. In addition to her work as a singer, she's been a composer or sound designer for 5 feature films and numerous shorts, with work screened at major festivals in Canada, the US, Switzerland, and New Zealand. She's the author of an astonishing variety of compositions, including The Loathly Damsel, a 2-act opera for young voices, chamber ensemble, and electroacoustics; St. John's Waltz, an electroacoustic piece that explores the sounds of Signal Hill, as well as works for a percussion ensemble, saxophone quartet, guitar-cello duo, and more. She's received commissions for music and soundscapes that have been performed across Canada and around the world. These works have received wide recognition, including the Lilburn Composition Award for Best Electroacoustic Multimedia Work, the Nicholas Werner Award for Excellence in Electroacoustic Music, the British Columbia Leo Award for Best Musical Score in a Short Drama, and a wide range of grants from the Canada Council, the British Columbia Arts Council, and beyond. Her article, Environments, the Convergence and Divergence of Practice, is forthcoming in the journal Organized Sound, and she's delivered papers at scholarly conferences on electroacoustic music, music and technology, sound studies, and musicology in Europe, in Australia, and in North America. The title for her talk this evening is Ecological Performativity, a Creative Research Practice. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Teresa Connors.
I'll get that slide back there. So thank you very much for that introduction. I appreciate that. And good evening. Thank you all for coming to this presentation. And a warm thank you to Music Media in Place for the invite and support, which includes Dr. Harrisberger, Dr. Megan Forsyth, and Spencer Crew for his assistance. I would also like to express my gratitude to Dr. Ellen Waterman and the International Institute for Critical Studies in Improvisation for awarding me with the 2017-18 postdoctoral research position located at MUN Music and housed here at MMaP. It is a real delight to be back in Canada, in particular Newfoundland, where I am originally from. However, it's close to 30 years now since I've been away, and I've just landed here from New Zealand, where I conducted my practice-based research at the University of Waikato. Now, for those not familiar with the terminology practice-based research, it is a methodology whereby the making of the creative artifact constitutes the research. And for those interested in this methodology, we will be hosting a workshop in early November on practice-based research. I like to think of practice-based research as an inquiry into or through practice. What I envision for tonight's talk is a descriptive account of a number of practice-based collaborations that have resulted in a series of practice-based installations. These works explore the relationship of environment, material, and process, and are derived from an intensive data gathering procedure and immersion within the respective environments. And then along the way, I will weave some of the thinking companions, what I call my thinking friends, that I've been drawn to, all of whom are involved in recent critical, theoretical, and philosophical discourses revolving around the subject of human and non-human agency, generally referred to now as the non-human turn. And then it is out of the creative practice and reorientation that the artistic process I refer to as ecological performativity has evolved. Now, I'm going to have a lot of slides and a lot of videos, so you may not be able to see some of them. However, so in reference to this one, there's nothing overly new in actually thinking in terms of agency or performativity of humans and non-humans. And in Western thought has evolved from a wide variety of philosophical, scientific, and artistic research the last 20 or so, or the last century or so. However, of late, there has been a reinvestigation or reconceptualization into these ideas, which, as creative researcher Chris Salter points out, is encouraging a radically different vision of the world. And similarly, sociologist Andrew Pickering suggests that the world is a dance of agency. Now, this is Pickering's attempt to move away from the idea that agency is specific only to humans or to what he refers to as human exceptionalism, and that by exploring the performative relationship between things, we can invite an open-ended extension of revealing rather than inframing. And Judith Butler, who I have to mention because she has spent a lot of her life committed to the trope of performativity, she joins this reworking by recently foregrounding performance as an action or practice that can happen in the streets, in the mall, in ordinary life, and in every possible instance of motion and stillness. Now, for my own creative practice, so I've just put some theory up there, but from my own creative practice, I can trace my explorations into the day-to-day situated encounters with the stuff of the world back to a number of fixed media collaborations that took place in the 1990s, in particular, motion parallax. Now, I'm just going to describe this project because my collaborator, Andrew Denton, and I, we now consider this a beautifully naive idea. We traveled from Tofino, British Columbia to Cape Spear, Newfoundland, filled up the van with 16mm film, 2 Bolexes, and recording gear, and stopped every 24 kilometers and gathered audiovisual data. So it was a long summer. And it was very interesting. At the very last day of the long film shoot, we ended up at Cape Spear. And, you know, I'm from here, so I looked out in the ocean. I saw that white streak in the ocean. I said, Andrew, get your camera going because in 10 minutes, the fog is going to roll in, which it did. And so our film ends with the fog rolling in. Now, sorry, I was just checking the sound. Since then, field recordings have taken place throughout North America, New Zealand, and Australia, resulting in a catalog of multimedia works that are intrinsically linked to geographical and everyday phenomena. My research has also evolved from fixed media formats to developing nonlinear systems which use weather, meteorological, and environmental data, as well as sonification, computer vision, and improvisation. So to clarify a couple of those terms, sonification is the transformation of data into acoustic signals, while computer vision is concerned with automatic extractions and analysis of information from moving images. And I have recently been using sonification and computer vision quite a lot in my works. And also in my research, I use the term nonlinear rather than generative art to foreground my shift away from linear trajectory of fixed media or pre-rendered formats to explore processes that are not fixed in time. So then the first installation that I will demonstrate, and the works that I'm presenting here tonight, they go in a linear trajectory time-wise. So this work, Beads, that I will be showing you, was done in 2013, while the last work I show was done in 2017. And hopefully it expresses the trajectory of my work from the nonlinear to what I'm doing now. So Beads, this work uses material collected from the worst maritime environmental disaster excuse me, to occur in New Zealand, the running aground of the MV Rena in 2011. Now, the major pollutants to wash ashore were small white plastic beads used for packaging. So Brene Burton, my collaborator, set about documenting the effects the pollutants would have on the shoreline. And in this instance, he placed a waterproof GoPro camera into the beads at the tide mark, calculating that the 10-minute intervals would pass before a wave of significant height would just come in and destroy it all, which it did. So for my part, I became interested to explore computer vision as a generative and sonification device. So what is specifically tracked in this installation is the motion of the clouds in the video and the movement of the waves. And through that, the assets that are affected by this motion include weather data collected on the day the vessel ran aground, including the changing wave heights and the fluctuation of ocean water temperatures. And this data, in turn, was transcoded into triggering agents on audio signals, volume controls, and effects units. Now, the following video briefly demonstrates the Beads Max patch. I do all my creative coding in Max MSP. And this particular section is right at the end of the 10-minute cycle where the wave comes in and blows everything up. One of the sonic layers you can hear in that particular small snippet is an acoustic instrument. And that's become a very important aspect of my research, that within the iterative developments of these systems, an acoustic musician is invited into the process at some stage to respond improvisationally to the material. And in this case, I had the use of Peggy Lee, the collaborator from Vancouver, who's an outstanding improviser. So in some ways, I consider this iterative, collaborative process of being in different environments and gathering the material, which then informs the development of the computational systems, plus the acoustic improvisation, similar to what anthropologist Tim Ingold refers to as the meshwork. Now, Ingold defines meshwork as a zone of entanglement where there are no insides or outsides, only openings and ways through. He proposes meshwork rather than network to recast the linear orientation of past and present time to that of an interwoven narrative where the ways of inhabiting knowledge are alongly integrated. And I love those last two words, alongly integrated, because that's how I work. Things just alongly become integrated into the work. And Ingalls says that by examining life like this, he equates it to the lived experience to that of a wayfarer, so both human and non-human, as life that is lived along interwoven lines rather than ones that go from A to B. The result of the movement and the subsequent lines creates an ever-evolving meshwork in which each wayfarer is embedded. So in the following work, Aspects of Trees, the zone of entanglement or environment which was explored was the decimated forests on the west coast of North America due to the escalating pine beetle epidemic. Now, this work is the result of a 2-year field recording process that comprises video footage from these forests, as well as audio captured inside and on the surface of the affected trees. Now, from these field recordings, I began to develop the tree instrument. This is my tree instrument, which amalgamates sonic material and computational processes for the purpose of live improvisation with cello, laptop performer, and visual projections. So in this particular instrument, I use sonification through the use of, I'll just point it out. Right here, if I press that button, it plays a movie and it sonifies the movie. So that is available in the instrument. There is also embedded in the instrument a delay unit that's based on tree ratio growth. So that's, kind of like Fibonacci series. Every certain plants have a ratio growth. So I coded that into it. And as well, I became fixated, I would say, on some of the images that we extracted from the video. So some of these images, they were created, what my collaborator Andrew told me, through what they call points of failure in the video, which is caused by rolling shutter, a distortion when the scan lines of the image are not exposed at the same time. And to me, they look like graphical music notations, and which appeal to my musician's eye. So what I tried to do then, these images were used then, I sonified them, but I sonified them using the internal tree audio samples that in this instance was the insect activity, which I will play. So that's the sound of the pine beetle inside the tree. So then to sonify these images, I had to change the image to black and white, and then you get, you can see it. So then in the tree instrument, all these components are available for selection during improvisation. As well, there's a live feed from the cello which passes through a convolution process with the tree audio samples. And this following video example comes from the middle portion of the work, which portrays the decimated forest. This specific performance was done in Toronto with cellist Anne Bourne, who also is a fantastic improviser. Observations made during aspects of trees. Now, when we perform that, right now it's quite in a small space. When we perform that piece, the images are quite large. And so observations made during aspects of trees highlighted for me the need for an open-ended, iterative interactions within the environment, material, and in the methods, pathways, and techniques employed in the creative practice. And it was at this time I came across Karen Berard's book, Meeting the Universe Here, Halfway. Here Berard goes to great length to give a performative account of techno-scientific and other natural culture practices to propose her notion of intra-action, in which human and non-human, matter and meaning, subjects and objects, experiment and phenomena are always in the making, co-evolving from a direct material engagement with the world. Phenomena for Berard are understood via the work of quantum physics Niels Bohr, particularly his materialist understanding of the relationship between concepts and material discursive practices, apparatuses. Berard accordingly reworks Bohr's relational position to propose her notion of intra-action, through which she proposes that existence is not an individual affair, where entities pre-exist their interaction, but rather an ongoing ebb and flow of agency where individuals and things emerge through and as part of their entangled intra-relating. So now we have Berard in my head and Ingold's meshwork floating around and Andrew Pickering's dance of agency. All this stuff is going about in my head while my collaborators and I are out and about doing our thing. And I start asking myself, what is it about these experiential encounters with the stuff of the world that has held my curiosity for so long? And what significance does it have on my mode of artistic practice? And how does this practice motivate the conditions in which creative possibilities are activated, assembled, and processed? More specifically, what would motivate my collaborators and I to venture on field recordings that place us in Death Valley at 53 Celsius, the polluted wastelands of the Salton Sea in Southern California, and the busy streets of Los Angeles? And what does making art from these lived and experiential encounters in the world do? So once those questions started surfacing, I started to wonder that if we could broaden our understanding of agency and performativity, what other vocabularies, capacities, and tendencies might emerge in the making, doing, thinking of creative practice? Could this perhaps encourage a different way to be in the world and sense it? And if so, as a creative practitioner, what then is my response and responsibility? So the following work, Flight Variant, I would say is the work that fully pushed me into the nonlinear practice and more informed the notion of ecological performativity. This work emerges from a 3-week field recording project that took place in 2014 with my longtime collaborator, film and video artist Andrew Denton. We began in Southern California and then moved up through Los Angeles into Death Valley, into Sequoia National Park, Reno, Salt Lake City, and then on to Glacier National Park. And there were many sites visited and field recordings made along the way, but specific to Flight Variant, which includes flight jet streams and audio recordings from and around the Los Angeles airport. The resulting installation is driven by an algorithm which is based on aviation statistical data, which states that worldwide, 90,392 flights take off per day, which I couldn't believe when I found that out. That's a lot of flights. So that's one every 1.604 seconds. Of that number, 1,578 occur at the Los Angeles airport, which means one plane every 55 seconds is taking off from Los Angeles airport. So these figures I then used in the installation to randomly trigger the jet stream videos, the sound samples, and aspects of the piano score. The piano score is as well created by sonifying flight arrival times, which are streamed directly into the installation off the Los Angeles airport webpage. And this is happening constantly, so it's always changing. Additional components in this work include vocal clips from YouTube, TV, and radio, plus cello and clarinet improvisation convolved with the sound of jet planes passing overhead. So just to briefly, and I didn't say this yet, the process of convolution I've used a lot. I love it as a composer. What it is, if those who may not know, is a computational process that combines two audio sources in such a manner that the frequencies they have in common will be emphasized proportionately, and those that they do not have in common will just fade away. So the following video briefly demonstrates the flight variant max patch and the work.
We will see more extremes. They will occur more frequently and they're likely to be more severe.
Whatever you maximize, if you do it long enough, will eventually destroy the system as a whole.
Many of these same scientists who are denying global warming were the same scientists who were back 20, 30 years ago. No, they're the same people. Fred Singer back in those days, these guys were all...
Some of them looked at the studies of secondhand smoke and didn't like what they saw, what the EPA was doing for political purposes on the impact of secondhand smoke, but no one's out there saying that's just a smear. In fact,
how is it different?
For takeoff to rapid posture, to go flight 3073.
So then, in thinking through these different modes of thought, the result has evolved into what I have come to call ecological performativity. This is a mode of practice that considers in act and thought the context and creative process and the resulting artifacts as a responsive embodiment of larger structures of phenomena. Here then the notion of creativity shifts from an anthropocentric understanding to a relational and performative ontology, where the interactions between people, places, and things constitutes a dynamic mode of artistic practice. So rather than the holistic ecological philosophy of everything is connected to everything, here the specificity and proximity of connections matter, who or what we are bound up with and in what way. Moreover, for me, configuring these works where the data and the visuals became triggering agents led to my contemplating such apparatuses as co-creative devices. Beyond technical considerations, this idea introduced a way of thinking and being in artistic practice that, as described by Erin Manning and Brian Masumi from Montreal, is an environmental mode of awareness. And this is a quotation from these guys. Quote, the making felt of a co-compositional force that does not yet seek to distinguish between human and non-human, subject and object, emphasizing instead an immediacy of mutual action, an associated milieu of their emergent relations. So given the research creation context in which I work, making and thinking with co-creative and emergent relations opened a pathway to consider, for me, the performative aspects at work in my practice and in the situated encounters experienced in the field. So the most recent installations to engage in this process is Piano at the End of a Poison Stream and Cathedral. Now, both of these works also result from that 3-week recording trip with Andrew up through the West Coast, similar to Flight Variant. And Piano at the End of a Poison Stream uses material collected at Bombay Beach, located at the Salton Sea in Southern California. So this inland body of water was formed in the early 20th century when the Colorado River breached its banks and flowed for 2 consecutive years into the Salton Sink. And of course, taking advantage of California's newest and now largest lake, the Salton Sea became a favorite getaway spot for nearby Los Angeles and San Diego residents. So during the 1950s and 60s, Bombay Beach became a prosperous resort town. However, with no drainage outlet, the inflow of industrial pollutants and untreated sewage increased the lake's salinity and caused the water to deoxygenate, so that by the 70s, the Salton Sea's ecosystem had deteriorated. So here's the Salton Sea. The indexical signs now of human and non-humans now litter Bombay Beach, which has been described as the most depressing place in California, and I will say yes, it is. Once Andrew and I had adjusted to the initial shock of this environment, we proceeded to record these indexical signs. Denton finds himself visually drawn to the monotonous water and reflections of the birds in flights. And for my part, I became transfixed with the numerous objects scattered throughout this landscape. So rusty metal objects, sticks sticking out of the ground, wooden refuse from dilapidated buildings, sections of concrete slab, plastic bags flapping in the dead bushes, and a lone piano. I was so excited to find the piano. So it was during this field recording, I really wanted to find a way to find the words to contextualize, like, why am I standing in this place fascinated by a plastic bag flapping in a dead bush? What is making me want to record that? And I was lured to record all these objects. So fortunately, I came across Jan Bennett's Vibrant Matter. And in this particular book, Bennett introduces her idea of thing power, which, as she says, recasts everyday inert objects into active and vibrant material. And in so doing, Bennett breaks with the subject and object dichotomy by giving agency to the energetic vitality intrinsic to matter and the active, earthy, and complex entanglements of human and non-human encounters. And it's very important to note here that Bennett's brand of materialism does not infuse spirit or soul or God into objects, nor does my work at all. Her goal instead is to acknowledge and give greater recognition to the effective and agential capacity of natural and artifactual things as an attempt to tune the human body for rendering it more susceptible to the frequencies of the material agencies inside and around us. So Bennett developed her thing power from her own chance encounter of an assemblage of things, which included a glove, pollen, or a dead rat, a plastic cap, and a stick. And so this kind of resonated with my encounters of the things I found at Bombay Beach. And as Bennett says, thing power gestures towards the strange ability of ordinary man-made items to exceed their status as objects and to manifest traces of independence, constituting the outside of our own experience. Thus, the objects found at Bombay Beach had a certain affectivity of their own, which in a way answered my question of why am I standing here recording this stuff? And so, for Piano at the End of a Poison Stream, I combined, this is actually one of the biggest installations I've ever done. I combined visual elements of the water in a 4-panel setup with random functionality, and that was projected onto a quite big fabric in the back of the gallery. I also recorded a significant amount of sonic fields and human object interaction using contact mics, hydrophone, a piano microphone system, and 2-channel shotgun mics. So various fields of sonic material was captured, including the broken piano. I as well sonified historical graphs of the salinity of the Salton Sea, and I'll just play that. However, on the second trip to Bombay Beach to record more of the piano that we'd found, it had been burnt. Somebody burnt it the night before. There was a party on the beach and they burnt the piano, and I was gutted. However, with Jan Bennett in my mind, I proceeded to use contact mics and recorded a somewhat different piano ecology. As well, Andrew, my collaborator, recorded a large number of videos of the burnt piano, which in the gallery setup was routed to 3 42-inch monitors on the floor, placed on the floor, and also coded to randomly select between 30 videos. And as well, there's iPads throughout the gallery with footage of birds in different flight. And I tried many ways to use computer vision in this installation. What I settled on was the birds in flight. So, and you'll see it in the next video, but I'll just describe it here. Every time a bird hits the side, it sends a trigger to the audio computer to play randomly a sound in the sonic field. So the following video demonstrates the bird triggering match patch and footage from the gallery presentation at Waikato University in April this year. So another thinker that I have been drawn to help contextualize my creative practice-based research is Timothy Morton. Morton's Dark Ecology project proposes a way of thinking and being that embraces ambiguity, uncertainty, and the uncanniness of the entangled mesh. Drawing on Graham Harman's object-oriented ontology, Morton offers his notion of the strange stranger, the dark depressing, and the weird weirdness as an alternative form of ecological awareness in which hesitation, irony, and thoughtfulness are put back into ecological thinking. Morton consolidates his notion of weird by first drawing on the Old Norse meaning of the word earth, meaning twisted or in a loop. Subsequently, weird is identified to mean causal, destiny, worth, and becoming. From his dark ecological project, Morton's weird weirdness is a turn, and this is quote unquote, a turn or twist or loop, a turn of events, a dark pathway between causality and the aesthetic dimension between doing and appearing. Thus, Morton's weirdness emerges from his ecological thought that imagines a multitude of entangled life forms and the radical intimacy that dwells therein. And for Morton, there is much to be gained in this intimacy with the weirdness, in that we realize how hopelessly we are entangled in the mesh. With this realization comes responsibility, out of which the idea of a capital N nature is problematized and abandoned. And I have often felt this feeling of weirdness in different field recording encounters, like Bombay Beach. So I was drawn to Morton's work as it enabled a broader sensibility for me to consider the entanglements at work between different bodies in a non-reductive and contingent way. Morton's thinking resonated also with the next final piece I will demonstrate tonight, Cathedral. This work emerges from field recordings in Sequoia National Park, and I would say that at this stage of the 3-week trip with Andrew, we were very much feeling the dark depressing, as we had encountered many disturbing locations. Also, for my part, the moments that I was pulled aside by security guards with guns asking me what I was doing it really played on me. Almost every day I was pulled aside. Andrew could go in anywhere with his video cameras, no problem, but once I put my microphone up, what are you doing? So in the park, I found that being bused to the entrance of a long descending walkway, coupled with the overwhelming amount of tourists, all coming to gaze and capture through their cameras the largest sequoia tree in the world, I found it at that particular time, it was disturbingly sad. It was this weird procession down this paved walkway to see just one lone tree. However, the way the shafts of sunlight popped through the trees from my dust-covered window on the bus, it looked like stained glass. And once off the bus and plugged in, I had my cans on and my microphone, I became transfixed by the sonic qualities of this environment. The natural reverb of the forest is similar to a very large cathedral. And the chatter of tourists interjected with the scurrying flip-flops of children, footsteps of their parents, and the haunting sounds of crow calls created a weird polyphony. Descending the paved trail then to finally arrive at the main attraction, General Sherman, the concentration of voices became sonically dissonant. The overlapping languages coupled with the natural reverb of the forest morphed into this strange yet beautiful choir like in a cathedral. Punctuating this vocal polyphony were the various mechanical and digital sounds of cameras. So it was out of these interactions that the cathedral installation emerges. Now, Andrew captured many images of sunlight through the trees, which I eventually used 30 in this installation. And for my part, I did go full into computer vision here. Anytime there's a sudden change in sunlight in the video, it sends a trigger to sound as well as playback speed of video. I'll just show the next one. So how this particular, what I call a video fabric, this is a video fabric, is displayed on a huge hanging sheet. There's 6 videos playing at the same time, exact similar videos. However, when the light, the sunlight is analyzed and sends triggers, it is changing the speed of each video. So each video has a rate change, and that offsets the videos, which is why you get this kind of fabric-looking thing. Also in this video, I devised a way that to change where the video placement is within the 100th screen frame. So if video 1 is up here or here, I can just press a button and switch it to another place. And what I started to do with that configuration is, again, I took tree ratio growth numbers and devised a program to pump out placements for the video based on the tree ratio. It doesn't show that here, but and particularly, I think 4 of them are 4 of the fabric images are based on the tree ratio growth. So for the sonic aspect of Cathedral then, a large portion of the field recordings from Sequoia National Park contained tourists speaking different languages. Each language and speaker had different rhythms, timbres, and pitches that, in the natural reverb of the forest, overlapped into a polyphonic sonic element. I became interested in bringing these voices into the nonlinear installation without overtly focusing on the specificities of the spoken voice or the spoken words. So I used the process of auto-convolution, and that is convolved. That's a process of convolving one sound with itself so that the stronger frequencies become stronger while the weaker frequencies drop out. So I'll just give a small example. So that's just a really messy, short audio clip. But once I auto-convolve that, I think this was done 4 times, you end up with So there's a lot of these sound samples. This is just one very short one. There's a lot of these sound samples within the installation that are triggered by the sunlight. And this also inspired me to include short vocal improvisations into the audio folder, which then are randomly selected based again on the movement of the sunlight. As well, these vocal improvisations were recorded using an impulse reverb from Sequoia National Park. So while I'm improvising, it is doing live convolution with an impulse from the park. And the final tiny apparatus that I threw into this work was a polybuffer sampler. That's just a short example. With this device, the selected audio is routed to a MIDI pitch sampler randomly triggered by the incoming video analysis. And for this instrument, I selected 4 vocal improvisation samples, 2 camera samples, 1 bus sound, 1 crow, and a footstep samples. This short video to follow then was captured from the gallery presentation at Waikato University in April this year. Now in this gallery configuration, along with the video fabric and sonics, are 2 monitors that display a high-resolution close-up of General Sherman's bark, which continuously pans upward. This endless upward motion occurs as 2 simultaneous videos are constantly fading in and out from each other. So then to conclude for this portion of the evening, as a practice-based researcher, I was drawn to these recent critical, theoretical, and philosophical discourses presented tonight to help broaden my ideas on agency and performativity, which provided for me different vocabularies to think about creative practice. I was inspired by the way that these others were thinking and writing about human and non-human agency and making human exceptionalism problematic. So then from the core of practice, and I emphasize that all the time because as a practice-based researcher, I'm working from the core of creative practice. So from the core of practice, I began the task of considering my creative research with these thinkers, and as such, the concept of ecological performativity emerged. So in this mode of artistic practice, the performative aspect of people, places, and things move in a dance of agency, via Andrew Pickering, that explore co-creative processes that tease out emerging paradigms of expression. What I encountered in my research was that with attentiveness to these interactions, and that's via Karen Berard, diverse temporalities are unfolded into the practice, which draws forward different patterns of relationships. These relationships are unpredictable to the effects and capacities available in the environment and with the materials. Consequently, I found that an aesthetic developed, one that does not operate in the mainstream anthropocentric notion of creativity, but rather emerges by intersecting with different forces. Ecological performativity, I believe, inhabits a multimodal method that does not attempt to fit neatly into a singular reductive template, but rather consciously takes account of the complexities, possibilities, and interwoven threads of the entangled mesh. And with that, I will leave you with a final quote by Timothy Morton. And for those of you who don't know Morton's work, his idea of what a hyperobject is refers to objects or agents so massively distributed in time and space as to transcend localization, such as the biosphere, global warming, or the sum of all the whirring machinery of capitalism. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that stimulating talk. Really enjoyed it enormously. We have time for questions. We'll start with a question from someone in the gallery, but we'll also take questions if there are folks in the chat room. So
it might be a little bit off subject, but I noticed you were using mostly software to trigger your samples and delays and stuff. Do you think that analog hardware and stuff still has a place in the music business in the future? Or do you think that it'll mostly be digital softwares?
I can only speak from my practice, and I would say no, I am not interested in using old hardware because there's very practical reasons that I do that. When I go to a gallery to set these pieces up, they had to be bomb-proof. I set the computer up, I press the button, and it has to go. And so older mechanics. Plus, you know, there's a lot that I can do in Max MSP. I mean, I'm only showing you a very tiny bit of the things that I can do, or anybody can do in it. So, from my perspective, from my practice, but other practitioners would say something else, definitely.
Thanks, Teresa. What a great talk, and great to see and hear your work and Andrew Denton's work, too.
Thank you.
I wondered if you could speak a little bit about the collaboration between a sonic artist and a visual artist, and whether there's, whether the word improvisation is meaningful in that collaboration.
Yep.
And also whether the word entanglement or enmeshment is meaningful in that collaboration. Certainly it's obvious that it's meaningful with what you do with the materials, but I'm thinking more of the interpersonal, the distributed agency of the artists across the media. So.
Well, you know, that's a very big question, and I thought about putting it in this talk, but I was like, okay, you've already got enough in there. Andrew and I have been collaborating for a very, very, very long time, and we have worked out a way to just go about our business. However, what happened in my shift to nonlinear practices, and this happened right after Aspects of Trees into Flight Variant, Andrew went in this direction, fixed media, no music. I went into this direction of whatever that is, nonlinear processes, and we no longer consider what we do collaborations. I actually, Brian Mizumi talks about this, and I can't remember what he called it. But so instead of saying collaborations, I'm using this other term that has gone from my head, but it's about emergence, processes of emergence. The interesting thing, and this is specific to my situation, we've been collaborating for a very long time. When we are out and about doing our thing, he is fully, he has full confidence that I will get the sound that he needs, and I have full confidence that he is going to get things that I will use. Like all those jet streams, he was collecting them for quite a number of years before before we even talked about what to do with them. He actually made a fixed media video from those jet streams, and I proceeded to go in the other direction. Did I cover it all? My master's thesis was on collaboration, so I've written and looked at it quite a lot. I looked at it from a systems theory perspective, talking about collaborations as adjacent possibilities, that within the collaborative improvisation, there is definitely improvisation out in the field. I mean, who knows what you're going to get out there. And from there, then I started thinking about collaboration more and more, actually, from how Brian Mizumi was describing it. Oh, sorry. Yeah, one other.
Thank you very much for this really stimulating talk.
Thank you.
I've got 4 questions, but I'll stick to 2.
4? One at a time. Like.
No, I'm really interested in the relationship between sight and sound here. So my first question has to do with the very muted palette of the visual here, and I'm wondering if there was a conscious suppression of color, and how. I don't know if you can answer that question, but I'm wondering if you've spoken about that with Andrew Denton.
Are you referring to all the works or one specific work?
Well, I would say in general. I mean, there was some color in there, but I think I'm comfortable saying that it was a muted palette.
I actually don't feel qualified to answer that. Andrew, are you online? Down in New Zealand?
All right.
I am not qualified to answer that.
Okay.
Yeah. I know that I can say, though, for his practice, and specific to that 3-week trip from hell, he was using a very narrow process of, he had this super high definition camera, super long lenses, and he was doing this slow motion photography. So during that 3 weeks, everything he recorded, most of the things he recorded was within that process. And he specifically put that process into his practice for his PhD.
Okay. I guess what I'm getting at is, did it make you think about sound differently? Or
No.
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 Okay.
I wouldn't say.
All right. I'm also I'm also really interested in Tim Ingold's work these days.
Yeah,
and
he's good.
And I'm very conscious of his insistence on the unison of experience, and he warns against the separation of senses. So I'm wondering if you are thinking at all about how to integrate other sensory modes beyond sight and sound into your installations.
Well, actually, for my research with ISIS, I am put forward to include not my senses, but the senses of the audience. And I actually have done some work on that. I did quite a big installation. I was the creative coder, not the composer, where we actually took medical equipment and made this installation where people would come in, just plug in their heart rate, and that set things in motion. My goal is to bring that into the installation process, the things that I'll be doing here in Newfoundland. Yep.
Hi, thank you for the talk. So in your creative practice, there's the fieldwork aspect, your recording, the film work, there's the improvisation, chants, all this, and this, I guess your line of thinking comes out of that creative practice, but I'm wondering if in other creative practices there is room for this type of thinking. I'm thinking very immediate, very local. Two people stand up, start singing in this room. Is there just as much ecological performativity in that type of situation?
I haven't thought about that. I think that's a good
where,
question.
Yeah,
because, well, you are in an environment here where this is a space, it's an environment, things are happening, people are breathing and their hearts are beating. So it is, in a sense, an ecology. So, yes.
Okay. I came tonight to make sure that was the case.
But, because I've veered very deep into creative coding, it's this idea of data is just, I'm fixated on it right now. And that's not in fully responding to your question, but I know that in my mind I'm thinking, well, ecological performativity, it's the data streaming and all these combined things. But if somebody wanted to take what I proposed into their practice, it's there to do. That's actually one of the reasons why I dove into this kind of theory, was just, to dive into it, to get muddy with it, and then see what other people would do with it.
Thank you. I really found your work fascinating. I guess I'm wondering, you tend to gravitate toward ecological sites that don't speak well of the future health of the earth. I mean, they're really difficult.
Yeah, they are.
Places. And yet often what you do with them has moments of amazing beauty, and so your response is quite interesting. I guess what I'm wondering is whether you've ever at an installation had a little notebook where audience could actually record what they thought they were seeing and what they took away. Like, do they think differently about these places?
I haven't done that. Yeah, I've audience. It is something that I will go towards. In fact, it's one thing that was commented on with my PhD research, but I was very much into the practice-basedness of what I was doing as opposed to the practice-ledness, which would bring in the audience feedback. I am interested in people's feedback, but, there's only so much I could do. And also, I do actually want to comment on what you pointed out of the beauty. I think it's the filmmaker Richard Moss. His work is fantastic, but one of the things he said that stuck with me, and I don't know a lot of his work, but he said the strongest tool in his box of creative thing was beauty.
Well, on that note, perhaps we'll end it there.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Connors, for a fascinating talk. Enjoyed it enormously.
I appreciate
Thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank the camera operators, Jake Denson-Faraday and Jing Cha, Spencer Crew, our video director, and of course, Dr. Megan Forsyth, our social media director. We will have our next talk in just a couple weeks, Dr. Jocelyn Guilbeault from the University of California at Berkeley. And I thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful night. Thank you.